Well, good morning, everybody, and I'm delighted to be here. If any of you came here this morning thinking that you were going to see a very famous American comedy actor, I hope you're not too disappointed. And if any of you are thinking about getting up and walking out, please know that I'm in charge of traffic branch. My sergeant's at the back, and she is watching you all. Now, I decided today to come in uniform. It was a bit of a debate. Do I come in uniform? Do I come in a suit? Do I come in jeans and open neck shirt? But I'm quite proud of this uniform. And when I was promoted to Assistant Chief Constable last year, I went home with my new uniform the night before, and I tried it on in the house, and I was looking at the lovely badges. And on our hat, we have lots of silver braid. And I thought it looked quite well, actually, and I said to my wife, "Did you ever in your wildest dreams think you would one day be married to an Assistant Chief Constable?" And she looked at me and she said, "Stephen, you're not in my wildest dreams." So my talk today is true. My talk today is called Stepping Stones and Stumbling Blocks, an Adopted Son of Derry. I hope as I talk, the stepping stones and stumbling blocks aspect will become clear. But I'll tell you at the outset where the adopted son of Derry bit came from. A few years ago, when I was the police commander in Derry, London Derry, I was approached by a lady representing a group called the Women of Hope, a group of ladies who had all survived cancer. And they were putting together a little charity book for Christmas, and it was called Be Still, the Thoughts and Prayers of the Sons and Daughters of the City of Culture. And they asked me would I contribute. So I thought about it, and I contributed a quotation that is quite meaningful to me, and it was a quotation by the Episcopal father of the poet Louis MacNeice, and it was delivered in a sermon in 1935 in Belfast and published in the Belfast Telegraph. And that quote is, "It would be well to remember and to forget. To remember the good, the things that were chivalrous and considerate and merciful, and to forget the story of old feuds, old animosities, old triumphs, old humiliations. Forget the things that are behind, that you may be the better able to put all your strength into the tasks of today and tomorrow." So I sent that in with my submission and a few remarks about why that quotation was important to me and how it was assisting me in my personal and professional journey. But I then said, look, I noticed that the title of your book is about the sons and daughters of the Maiden City, or the City of Culture. And I said, look, I'm from North Belfast. I've never lived in Derry. I'm unlikely to live in Derry. I love the place. I have a great affinity to it. So I'd be proud if you would use my submission, but I won't be at all offended if I don't meet your book's criteria. And she wrote back and she said, "Dear Stephen, what could be better than Louis MacNeice? And you are an adopted son of Derry." Now that little note became very important to me. I've treasured it. And whilst I would never deny my Belfast roots, developing that affection and that connection and that love for a city really couldn't have been any further from my mind when I passed out of the RUC training centre 28 years ago. Now, I'm not going to take any bets on whether I can still get into that uniform, because I suspect I would lose a lot of money, but that's me. 28 years ago, this month, September 1986, the day I passed out of the police training centre. And where did they send a young man from North Belfast but to Derry? Now, I had never been to the city before. I had never even been over the Glenshane Pass before, so it was a step into the unknown. And in those days, 1986, it was a difficult place for policing. It was a hostile place in some respects for policing. It was a very securitized form of policing. And in my first 6 months, my very first 6 months, 3 officers in the city were murdered. And as a young constable, I was selected to do duty at their funerals, where I marched in full uniform and slow march in front of their remains and behind the band. And that was my introduction into Derry. But along with those challenges, I was aware of something in me starting to grow, this connection to the city, And I went probably with the intention of trying to do 2 years and apply out. And I did 6 years, and I never applied out. I was promoted out. And I left, I remember the day I left, with a heavy heart. I was going on to a new chapter, but I was sad to leave it behind me. So I went away to County Armagh and different places, and 17 years later, I returned as the overall police commander for that region, everywhere from Strabane to Macrofelt, out to Limavady and Derry. And that was in 2009. And I remember when I arrived, recognizing the changes that had taken effect, the transformation in the landscape. A lot of the security apparatus swept away, but still some challenges. A very senior Sinn Féin representative said to me in my early weeks, "Stephen, what you have to remember is the people of this city have it in their bones to mistrust you." Now, I don't think he was trying to be dramatic. He wasn't trying to intimidate me, although I did think, what have I let myself in for? I think he was just stating a fact, that to many people in that city, the PSNI, the police, were still seen as a state force, and they had yet to prove themselves. And I realized at that point that I was no longer the constable in the beat, but I was the boss. Buck stopped with me. And what a huge responsibility that was, but also what a huge honour that turned out to be. Now, when I returned to Derry in 2009, obviously the patent reforms had been underway for some time. The name had changed. The 50-50 recruitment was well underway, and we were growing our representation of Catholics into the force. The uniform had changed. And I remember actually that day that Patton published, it was September 1999, 15 years ago this month, and I was sad that the RUC name had changed. I remember feeling hurt about it. It was an organisation I was proud to serve in. My father died in an RUC uniform, natural causes, but he died in the uniform in a police station, and the RUC crest is on his headstone. So I was hurt, I was sad. But I came to understand that you could implement all the reforms, you could have new procedures, new philosophical ethoses around policing with the community, around human rights, and you could really change. But if you were still called the same, and you still looked the same, to many people, there was no change. This had to be a new beginning for everyone. And it was my job to try and ensure that policing was to be judged on the actions of today and not still judged on the actions of the past, or the perceptions of the past. Everyone was on a journey, the city and me, and I was on a journey as an individual and as the senior police commander. And that journey led to some really surreal moments. I remember the first time I started to engage with people who I'd actually searched in the street all those years ago, whose houses I had searched. And now they were sitting in my office talking about policing, talking about trying to build community support and confidence in policing. And those engagements were constructive. They were never overly cozy, they could be challenging, but they were constructive. Everyone was on that journey. And I believe that policing can be a stepping stone or a stumbling block. I can do things that are procedurally correct, legally correct, but could be perceived as really clumsy and offensive. Or I could try and be accessible, reflective, thoughtful, take advice, think about things, try and understand the culture and be competent around that culture. Understand the difference between the what of policing and the how of policing. And the key to that is relationships. And I developed some wonderful relationships, very effective relationships for policing and for the betterment, I would say, of the community in Derry. And building relationships is a job of work. You don't learn to dance 10 minutes before the ball. Well, you don't go looking for help from someone in the middle of crisis. You build relationships before the crisis. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that we didn't make mistakes, that it was all plain sailing. In my time, we made some really bad mistakes. The time that there was a bomb or suspect bomb in the bridge and we couldn't get a grip of the road traffic diversions, and we effectively brought the city to a standstill? Or what about the time that we mistakenly searched the Sinn Féin mayor of Derry's house and had to publicly apologise? But we learned from those mistakes and we moved on. And we did our best not to repeat those mistakes. And just last year, we had the biggest policing operation outside of the Troubles era in the city with the United Kingdom City of Culture Award. Over 200 events over the course of the year. Fantastic year. And the highlight for me of that year was the All-Ireland Flag Show. And I remember in 2011, whenever they were trying to bid for the flag to come north for the first time ever in its history, there were security concerns and there was real risks that the bid was going to be blown off course. And I travelled to Dublin with a delegation from the city to talk to COLTUS, which is the awarding body. And I remember saying to them, you know, the police service get what this flag means in terms of social, cultural and economic investment into the region in the northwest of Ireland and in Derry. And we will do everything we can to support it and keep people safe. And the bid was successful. We got the green light. But more than one person said to me afterwards, "You put your head in the block there, fella. You've told everybody they're going to be safe." And I could have taken a conservative approach. It would have been down to me. It was entirely my decision how to police that. I could put road stops on the bridge. I could have had officers on patrol with rifles. That was within my gift. I could have taken a conservative approach, put a security, a ring of steel around the city. But what would have been cultural about that? So we worked with the organisers, we worked with the council, and I know Sharon O'Connor, the chief executive, is in the hall here, and we worked with all our partners in COLTUS and ILEX and the City of Culture Company, and we put together a policing operation that was reassuring, it was visible, but it got the balance right. And actually, I didn't want policing to become the story, but it did become part of the story, but overwhelmingly positive. Numerous people said it was great to see the police out walking about, getting photographs with people playing their music or reciting their poetry, and it was a wonderful week. And I realised that week that things had changed. The PSNI pipe band came along, and we didn't announce it for obvious reasons, but they turned up in Guildhall Square and they just started playing. And within 3 or 4 minutes, 400 or 500 people were there, clapping and cheering, and we went up on the walls and we played, and the mayor came out and joined us, and it was wonderful. And I realised at that point, policing had made it. It had become a part of the public life of the city. And we can't take that for granted. We have to keep working, all of us, together. Now, I claim no expertise. I'm not an expert in anything. But I do claim experience. And my experience of policing Derry tells me that if you want to build a better future, you have to build relationships. We can't continue to live a life of segregation, growing up only being exposed to one side of the story. Now, we all have a past, but if we can get beyond that past, if we can start to get to know the individual, it's very hard to retain anger and mistrust of someone you get to know. It's not easy. And it doesn't mean giving up on your principles or your beliefs. You can still abhor what someone has done, but have a relationship with them today. And if that relationship assists us as individuals, us as communities, and us as a society in moving forward, building a safer future for the next generation, isn't that worth taking the risk? I think so. My experience in Derry was overwhelmingly positive, and I have connections there now that will last a lifetime. My journey took me from the streets of North Belfast to the walls of Derry, and I will continue on. But we're all on a journey, and there will be stepping stones and there will be stumbling blocks along the way. But if we go on that journey together, we'll get there. We can do it together. Thank you.